Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, excuse me, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to this special presentation on the B2B integration playbook for Microsoft Dynamics ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning, presented by Cleo. One quick note, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Now, your Microsoft Dynamics ERP is the heartbeat of your organization and often the single source of truth for your business. Whether you are looking to get more out of your Dynamics investment or upgrade to Dynamics SCM or BC, modernization has been one of the hottest conversations in 2024. But ERP modernization projects require data migration, implementation, testing, and much more to go smoothly. So today, we're going to tell you the most important thing to have in place to ensure your ERP strategy and implementation is set up to maximize success and reduce risk. With that, I want to introduce our speaker for today. He is Dave Brunswick, Senior Vice President Products with Cleo. Dave leads the company's product strategy, product management, and product marketing functions. He brings more than 25 years of integration industry experience to his role, including in technical sales, pre-sales, technology strategy, engineering, product management, and product development. He previously served as Vice President Products and Vice President Solutions for Cleo, overseeing pre-sales, solution support, and product management functions in the US, EMEA, and India. With that, I want to turn it over to Dave Brunswick. Dave, take it away.
Thanks, Bob, for the great introduction. It sounds impressive when you read it out like that. Anyhow, let's move on with our presentation today. So we're going to talk about the B2B integration playbook for Microsoft Dynamics. Let's get started and take you through the agenda. So today's agenda, we're going to start talking about, whether you can look at ERP like building a house. So there's certain similarities and things that go together. So and comparisons you can make. So we'll start with that analogy, and then talk a little bit about where it breaks down. So the dangers of just looking inward, and then extend to a more holistic approach, maybe some other things that you may not be thinking about when you initially start thinking about ERP modernization, and specifically around connecting with your ecosystem, both internal and external integration with Dynamics. And then we'll get a little into the weeds, talk about some of the technical details of ways you integrate with Dynamics, and you're using the right method for the right kind of integration. We'll talk about visibility and the importance of being able to see what's going on once you've integrated. And then we'll wrap up by talking about how to choose the right integration approach and key takeaways before we go into the Q&A session at the end. So hopefully that looks like a good agenda for everybody, and we'll jump right in. Okay, so implementing a new ERP or upgrading your ERP, modernizing your ERP can be compared to some degree with building a house, right? So with building a house, first of all, you want to look at what your requirements are, and same with the ERP, study your business, select the ERP that meets your requirements the best. Then you need to decide, will it work for me as it comes off the shelf, or am I going to need some kind of customized approach? Do I want to customize my house in the house example? And then, fail to plan to fail. You've got to devise a plan and figure out how you're going to go ahead and execute on modernizing or implementing your new ERP. And then once you've done that, do your groundwork, get your foundations in place, phase the approach of building out the different business processes you need, or building the different rooms, whatever it happens to be, and then migrate your data, start moving into your house, test everything on the way, and there you go. You can move into your new ERP, and you will live happily ever after, hopefully. But if only it was that simple. yes, of course, you need to consider all of those things, and without them, you're not going to succeed, but you don't want to end up looking like this. So it's not just about implementing the ERP or modernizing the ERP. It's about looking out beyond your four walls and looking at what else in the world is important to your business. So I think of it, I grew up playing a video game called The Sims, which or SimCity more precisely, which you may have come across. So you can think in that game, it's about not just creating individual housing, but building the whole environment into which that house fits. So you need roads and railways and power production and all of those things that go with building a successful city. And the same is true for implementing and modernizing an ERP, right? You don't just need to think about what's inside the four walls of your business. You need to look out to the rest of the world and say, hey, who else do I interact with? Because that's equally as important in terms of being successful in implementing and modernizing an ERP. So let's take a look at a little bit more of a holistic approach. Yes, all of the things associated with the kind of house building analogy still apply, but there's a few other things to think about as well. Okay, so yes, obviously study your business needs, but also look at the integrations you're going to need with other internal systems. So an ERP may be the heart of your business, but there's going to be other things there, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And take the opportunity to look at your business working practices as a whole, because ERP modernization and modernization of your ecosystem integration is an opportunity to look at the business as well and say, hey, what can we do in this process to better serve the business? Then you need to choose the ERP and also any additional modules you need to add to that ERP. So there's some kind of fairly standard ways that Microsoft in particular would encourage you to go to particular versions of Dynamics depending on what you have. But also you should look at what are the other people in your industry doing? What are similar businesses doing? Because there you can get a very good insight into, well, all other bakeries are using this particular, D365 BC with these particular add-ons. So maybe that's something that I should be looking at if I'm a bakery, because there are these specialist add-on capabilities out there. So look at what custom modules you need, and importantly, make sure that those modules match the ERP you're selected. Then the next thing you need to look at, obviously, is migration and rollout and data migration, all of those things, how you're going to test it. And then start to look outside of your individual focus, looking in, if you like, and look at, okay, how do my customers buy from me? And then with these techniques they're buying from me, what do I need to integrate with to enable them to buy from me in the way that's going to be successful? And then looking at the other way, how do I order from my suppliers? Is that something that I can integrate and bring into the fold? And then how do I ship things? How do my suppliers actually get goods physically to me? How do I supply them out to my buyers? How does that fit into the whole ecosystem of my operations? And then finally, once ERP is live and once I've got these integrations built, then how am I going to operate it? So this is kind of looking at that bigger picture rather than building the isolated house, looking at it in the context of the city that you're going to build, which is the interrelationship with all your different trading partners that you work with. So if we look at this from a B2B integration perspective, then these are the pieces that kind of fit around the core ERP to allow it to fit into that network of partners, buyers, suppliers. So the integration with your other internal systems, the integration with your buyers, the integration with your suppliers, and then the potential integration with logistics around that too. And these are all things that you really should consider upfront before you start your ERP integration. The broader you think about the business itself, the interaction with the other people in the world, the other companies in the world that you do business with, and how those interactions should go smoothly and be automated, the more successful you're going to be in the implementation or upgrade or modernization of an ERP and the surrounding integration processes around it. And just so you know, you're not alone, and I'm not making this stuff up on the fly. Here's some quotes from other people who've been through this process of ERP modernization, and some things in hindsight that they kind of think they might have done better, or advice they would give to other people going through the same process. So, mapping out the entire supply chain and logistics process. So look at all the people you're interacting with, all the other businesses your business interacts with, and use that process of looking at to identify where maybe your existing systems are breaking down or not working as well as they could, and you could re-engineer them as part of ERP modernization and the integrations you do around that. And then specifically look at the internal systems as part of that as well. What do you need to integrate with? And make sure the business is bought in with all the stakeholders around the business so that you're solving the right problem. It's not just an isolated IT, we'll take care of it. It's just, bits and bytes problem. Because the ERP is the core of your business and integration is the core of how you get data in and out of that ERP, then you need to make sure that you're solving the right problems for the business as a whole. Okay, so let's drill down a little bit into more around the internal systems you might need to integrate with. Now I'm going to go from the higher level to a little bit more of the technical considerations that go with integration and implementation of an ERP. So just to orient this diagram, we've got Dynamics in the middle, and then we've got the potential systems you might be integrating with around the outside, and then a technology layer in between that is going to allow those integrations to happen. And there may be many different or more or a completely different set of systems you have inside of your environment, but the kind of the big picture is similar. So, for example, you might have a CRM, you might have Salesforce or something else where you manage your customer relationships and really manage the sales process. So, do you need to integrate with that? Where does your customer kind of get created? Where do orders get created? And do you need to sync between Dynamics and Salesforce, for example? If you do, then you're going to need some kind of API-based integration to do that. You might have a data warehouse or a data lake for getting insights on the business. They're probably in some kind of database. They could be in the cloud. So you might need to integrate directly into a database from Dynamics to get that data out, or using some cloud storage, Amazon S3, Azure Blobs to dump data out into so that the analytics systems can pull it out. And so there's this range of systems that you need to think about that butt up against the ERP and potentially interact with it. And as I say, everybody's set of systems is potentially going to be different, but you're going to see this range of integration technologies. And depending on the vintage, the age of the systems you're using, if it's all modern systems, then it's probably REST APIs and connectors and modern ways of integrating. But if you've got legacy systems, nothing wrong with that. They may be working perfectly fine for you. You might need to use file transfers or insert into databases or a whole range of other options. So when you're thinking about ERP, Dynamics integration, Dynamics implementation and the integrations around it, think about the other internal systems and the technology that you need to integrate with them. Then looking out a bit from once you've looked at your internal systems, look at, and I mentioned this, the buyers, the suppliers, the logistics providers that you might have to integrate with, and the technology that they are going to ask you to use or you're going to need to use to make sure that your Dynamics system is the center of your world and can get data and supply data in the right way for all those different parts of your ecosystem. So, for example, if you're listing on an e-commerce site or a marketplace, more and more marketplaces these days, not just Amazon, then you're going to need some kind of API-based integration between Dynamics and that marketplace. And so you need to look for an integration environment where you get those pre-built connectors that will allow you to very quickly plug into those environments. You might have large retailers who you want to sell to, in which case they're going to ask you to implement EDI. So you need the ability to plug into an EDI network or perform that EDI-based integration. You might have low-tech buyers, so you might need some kind of portal that allows them to just log in and buy from a portal. And again, you need to think about how am I going to integrate that into Dynamics if that's my system of record here. And the same goes for suppliers, whether they're advanced and want you to order from them with EDI, or less sophisticated, and maybe you want to provide them some way of receiving your orders that can easily be integrated again into your Dynamics system. So there's a range of different technologies that the rest of your ecosystem is going to ask you to implement, and so you need to think about that when you're implementing your Dynamics and the integration strategy around it. So the integration strategy should support all of your current needs, but also you should be looking down the line to see what you may need in the future. Maybe you're just selling to retail right now, but you want to go to direct to consumer at some point. So how would you integrate with that going into the future? Now, getting even further into the weeds on the D365, on the Dynamics side, there are different ways of getting data into and out of Dynamics. And so we can call APIs both to pull data out and put data in. There's also a variation on that, which is the OData formats, which is kind of a little bit like querying a database, but through an API. And then there's also support for the data management framework, which is much more suitable for getting files in and out, for dealing with large volumes of data and batch operations. So typically APIs for more real-time transactional data, the data management framework for file imports and exports. And depending on the integrations that you're doing, you may use one or more or both or all of those techniques. So, for example, to update the status of a couple of orders, then calling an API is the most efficient way to do that. But if you want to bulk export 10,000 invoices, then maybe an API isn't the right way to go. You need to do that through the data management framework, and particularly with Dynamics and a lot of these cloud-based ERP systems, they have limits on the amount of data you can transition through APIs. So, for certain transactions, you need to do them a different way. So you need to make sure you're choosing the best approach of integration into and out of Dynamics, depending on the best approach, depending on the actual integration, the type of integration you're doing, and make sure the platform you choose supports the different ways of getting these different ways of getting data in and out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about visibility. And this is really bringing together a bunch of things that we saw on the other slide. So on the right-hand side, all the different entities outside of your environment, outside of your control, you might want to connect with retailers and buyers and suppliers and marketplaces and so forth, logistics companies. And then on the left side, the range of systems, and there could be dozens of these that you might want to integrate with, which is all great. But think about what happens when things aren't quite going as planned. If you don't have a coherent and consistent approach to all these integrations, then trying to track down what happened or trying to understand what's happening can be really problematic. So we do thoroughly recommend that you consider the visibility in the operations side of things, as well as just how you build the integration in the first place. So, D365 might be your system of record. It probably is your system of record, but it isn't necessarily the system of truth. And what I mean by that is if you have, let's say, an EDI integration with a trading partner and they make an order from you, then as far as they're concerned, the fact you've accepted that order into your environment means they've successfully made the order. But if your integration fails for some reason, it could be the data they sent you was slightly corrupt, or some part of the system processing failed, then that information may never get into Dynamics 365, right? So you need and what you don't want to be is for your customer to be expecting that order to be delivered, but you never actually received it because something failed in between. So you need to have that visibility into the integrations. You need to have them alerting you when things go wrong so that you can see it before the system breaks down. And what I mean by the system of truth, the truth is really that you never received that order from that buyer, even though as far as the buyer's truth is concerned, they sent the order to you. So think about the visibility into the things you're integrating with and the techniques you're using for that integration. Okay, so we've talked about the different aspects of modernizing an ERP, and then how you need to consider it a part of that broader ecosystem of internal systems and external systems, and the importance of having some visibility into what's going on. So let's look at some of the common approaches to this B2B integration problem and the different kind of ways in which different vendors approach it. So the first kind of thing people think about is, well, I've only got a few things to do, right? I just need to quickly get this information from Salesforce into Dynamics, or from Dynamics into Salesforce. I know how to write programs. I can write a script or a custom program, and it'll be great. Easy to get going. Isn't that difficult. I'll just go ahead and do it. So the advantage is, of course, you can do anything you like with enough time and enough skill. You can program up any integration you want in your favorite programming language or scripting language. The challenge is it can very quickly get out of control. So when you do the second and the third and the fourth integration, suddenly you've got spaghetti of code. You don't have consistent logging. It becomes really difficult to operate, and you kind of discover that down the line if you haven't planned up front. It can be hard to support once you've got multiple integration patterns. And the thing I didn't write here is you can be dependent on the guy who wrote the code. So if he chooses to leave you and go somewhere else, now you're in big trouble because nobody really understands how all this stuff is working. And it's absolutely core to your business. So the second approach we see is using the integration platform as a service providers, or iPaaS, who typically have this flexible general purpose kind of integration environment, which is great. So it's a very flexible development environment, has a range of connectors to systems typically, and it's definitely faster and more efficient than building from scratch because it's designed specifically for that integration usage pattern. Couple of disadvantages or challenges we've seen: it can quickly become very expensive. The initial kind of costing model looks okay, but as soon as you start building significantly onto it, it can become a very expensive proposition indeed. Also, typically they're not specialized for these B2B type interactions. So, while they may support APIs, they may be weak in some of the protocols that are typically used for exchanging information between businesses, not have the sophistication of EDI to implement kind of EDI type integrations. And often you have to build the visibility on top of them. So they don't really have that business facing layer of being able to show the business what's going on with those integrations. Next thing we see is managed service providers. So they say, well, we'll take care of it for you. You don't need to worry about it. Give us your problems, we'll take care of it. And that can be great. If you fit in the box that they're good at, they can get you there very fast, right? So they typically have very standardized integration approaches, limited visibility into it, but they make the claim they can connect you very quickly into the top retailers with little effort on your part. And, you know, as I say, if you fit in the box, they can do that. They can do that pretty effectively. Typically, most customers don't exactly fit in the box, and that's where you can get into trouble. So when you start looking to that broader vision of, you know, where do I want to go with my business in the future, they may not be able to fulfill that need. Also, they typically, because, you know, they're talked about as black boxes for a reason, you have very little visibility into what's happening operationally. And, you know, when things go awry, it's not always easy to find out what's going on and what happened. And then you become very dependent also on that managed service provider for pretty much everything you do, right? So you're dependent on them. And if they choose, you know, if you can't do a particular integration with them, or want to do business with somebody who isn't in their network, it can be very frustrating and time consuming to try and actually get new integrations built. And then the final piece is you know, a specialized ecosystem integration platform. And, you know, those are created specifically for B2B integrations and have built in the operational insights around and the business level insights as to what's happening as that information flows, as orders come in and go out, as, you know, logistics transactions happen, built directly into the platform. And, you know, typically, and certainly in Cleo's case, the platform allows you to build your own integrations as well. So if either it's not there and you need it, then you can certainly build it, as well as have somebody build it for you, whether a partner or the vendor themselves. And then, you know, you also typically on these platforms have pre-built ERP, TMS, WS. Sorry, too many jargon words. Enterprise resource planning, transportation management systems, warehouse management systems, e-commerce integrations built in. So there's a lot of things you can just plug and play, but still you've got the flexibility to build new integrations which may be unique to your business on the platform as well. Challenges, historically, they've been more complex to build out. I think that's changed a lot in recent years. And you know, certainly we've gone a long way to making much more plug and play within that environment, so that you do have the same advantages to kind of plugging directly into, for example, the Dynamics ERPs on the back end, and then very quickly linking to e-commerce or whatever you need on the outside side. The other challenge is it may be more than you need. If you just need to solve one simple use case, then yeah, it's probably more than you actually need for that use case. But you know, you do need to keep thinking to the future and where you might want to go, and making sure that the approach you choose today is going to set you up for where you want to be down the line. And you're not going to be holding the business back by making the wrong choice on the integration platform. So final key takeaways, which hopefully I've kind of set up this slide with what I've said up to this point. You know, takeaway number one: focus on your business process. Remember that the ERP and the integrations around it are serving the business rather than the other way around. So look to your business, look to the processes when you're doing ERP modernization or implementation. Is there to serve those processes and make them more efficient. One way you can do that, number two, automate everything you can. So if you choose the right approach and the right integration platform, then you can integrate and automate a lot more, which not only reduces errors, which is one thing that can provide a lot of value, but also can free up staff to do more valuable things in the business, and just overall smooth out the operation as of a company and give it space to grow. Think about the integration up front. It's not an afterthought, and it's key to making the right choices in terms of how you set the business up for success. Number four, choose plug and play approach where you can, but also choose an approach that has the flexibility to enable your unique business processes and enables you to expand the way you want to in the future. Number five, ensure you use the right methods for the right integration. I went through the 3 different ways you can integrate with Dynamics, and make sure the tools you choose support each of those different ways so that you're not limited in terms of what you can integrate with and how you can do those integrations. Deploying and integrating your Dynamics ERP is just the start. Think about what it's going to be like to operate, particularly when you get your second and third integration built out. Where are you going to go to look at what's going on, to understand the problems? You don't want to be digging around in logs somewhere, so you want a platform that enables that visibility. And I mentioned this, think about your future needs. Don't just look down at today, what do I need to do today? Talk to the business, talk to the sales team, talk to everybody else about where the business is going in the future and what they're going to need from the ERP and the integrations around it going into the future. And then finally, choose the integration approach and platform that's right for your business, which kind of sums up the other 7 takeaways there. So with that, that's completed the kind of formal presentation that I put together, and we will move on to our panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was a great presentation. That is one heck of a house you're building with a lot of things to consider.
It's a whole neighborhood, right?
That's right. And the neighborhood too. I want to ask you a few questions, Dave, before we move over to the audience Q&A. But while we are having our discussion, I do want to remind our audience that you can continue to submit your questions at any time during this discussion by simply clicking on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. So, Dave, within this very complex series of considerations that you've led us through in the last half hour, what do you see as like the number one hiccup during an ERP implementation process?
I think it's really thinking in isolation. So it's not talking to the business, not understanding the what's going on outside of the ERP itself in terms of the business process it's enabling, and not thinking about the outside world and how it integrates into and interacts with the trading partners in your ecosystem. So it's very easy to think about it as an IT project. And that's kind of, I think, the number one hiccup. If you just think in those terms, then there's potential you're going to struggle to get it completed successfully.
Seems like that was kind of the mindset around ERP when the whole concept was introduced many, many years ago, that it was considered a giant IT project. Maybe that's why so many companies had so much trouble getting their ERPs up and running. So that's good advice. So as companies do begin to vet their B2B integration platform providers, there's so many possibilities there. What are some of the questions that vendors should be asking during that process?
Yeah, I think you should be looking for the vendors to kind of have the same level of curiosity. So they should be asking about your business and where it's going, and not just about the technical nuts and bolts, but really understanding where you want to go in the future, so that they can work with you to make the right decisions of what you need to integrate and how to do it. Of course, you want them to be able to solve your immediate problem, but you should be looking for them to be curious, and just be looking to understand, because that's the way, again, that's the way you're going to be successful.
So you talked, how does the level of ERP customization impact your B2B integration strategy? And I'm wondering how and impact implementation of a B2B platform altogether.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, because there's kind of 2 ways to look at it, and neither are quite right in themselves, right? So one way is to say, hey, I want to implement my Dynamics BC or SCM generic out the box, no customization, because then I know it's going to be supportable, and I know that any straight plug-in integrations are going to work straight away. We're not going to need any customization. So if you think of it from a pure IT perspective, maybe that's the way to go. But if you think of it from a business perspective, maybe the way that you run your business is unique, and your differentiation is actually defined by things you do differently from other people. And that might then require you to customize your ERP to support those kind of unique business processes. But then that's, the more customization you have in the ERP, the more you're going to need to be able to tweak and tune the integrations that you do to match that customization. And so it's really a balance between the two, and choosing the right customizations and add-ons in ERP to support your unique business processes, and then choosing an integration approach that can be modified to fit with those ERP customizations.
Are we at a time, Dave, when all those systems out there that could potentially be integrated with an ERP are easily done in that way? I mean, if you're getting them all from a single enterprise vendor, of course, that's one thing. But if they're all best of breed and they're coming in from all different directions, are there any particular integration issues that tend to pop up now with modern day ERPs?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is not all ERPs support all business processes in the same way. So, and that's why there are add-ons to the ERPs to fill the gaps, right? So to say, hey, you know, I don't know, the integration of Dynamics and Salesforce has been solved, or BC, Dynamics BC, let's say, may or may not be true, because you know your Dynamics might have some customizations there, and your Salesforce might equally be heavily customized. So yeah, you'll see a lot of, and we offer connectors and yeah, out of the box connections to various different systems. But so you know, some of the fundamentals of the problem have been solved, but there's always going to be nuances on top. So it's never going to be 100% out the box. It's the key is to be able to plug the ends in and then tune the middle piece to meet the specifics of the business, you know, customizations you have.
You talked about system integrators, the pluses and the minuses, but however way you look at it, they're often leaned on when you're migrating to a new ERP. So how do system integrators fit into the whole B2B integration platform selection process and implementation?
Yeah, I mean, system integrators are often key because they're the guys who really understand the depths of the ERPs more than anybody else. And if you choose a system integrator who's been there and done it before, that can save you a lot of time and missteps. And then, you know, looking to the B2B integration around that, some of the systems integrators, you know, work with vendors such as ourselves or other vendors to help you with that integration piece as well. Sometimes they don't. So it's horses for courses a little bit. One thing to be, you know, so they will make recommendations for integration vendors on occasions, and you know, quite a few of them will recommend us, and some will recommend some of our competitors, obviously. But I would say do your own analysis along with the SI, and make sure that they understand all the things that you're going to need going forward, so that you can make the best choice. But they're definitely a vital part to the ERP modernization for sure.
Now, there's so much turbulence out there in the marketplace on so many different companies, and they're having doubts or questions about the degree to which they implement new technology. That being the case, Dave, are you seeing a lot of organizations actually implementing new ERPs today, or a lot of those projects been put on pause?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing both ends of that actually. So there's kind of two ways to think about the world. Neither of which is right or wrong, I guess. But one is, hey, this is, you know, these are turbulent times, and this is the time to make sure that I am operating as efficiently and in the most agile way possible. So I'm going to take these turbulent times as an opportunity to kind of re-engineer and do that ERP modernization, integration modernization, because I know it's going to be critical to what happens, you know, going forward as things continue to, you know, the only thing that stays the same is change, right? So as things that continue to change, I'm going to be in a way better situation, and I can take this kind of opportunity to do it now. And we're seeing that in the small mid-market, more aggressive companies. In the larger organizations, they're tending more to kind of back off and say, yeah, we're going to sit on what we've got for a bit until we see how this shapes out. So we're seeing, yeah, really a bifurcation in both directions. You know, aggressive growing companies are saying now's the time to do it, to put us in the right place going forward. And some of the kind of larger companies are saying, no, I'm going to sit back and wait.
Well, they can't wait for too long, given the
That's
march
right.
of technology today with the cloud, with AI, with all the new bells and whistles on technology. You're going to be stuck with a legacy system in a very short time if you don't make some moves pretty soon. So hope they realize that. Now, you pointed out, Dave, the complexity of the trading partner environment. And some of them, these trading partners, of course, they had themselves have very complex EDI specifications. For example,
Mhm.
take an EDI 850 from one big box retailer. Might look different from a different big box retailer. So much for standards, right? In
Mhm.
any case, do certain EDI or non-EDI nuances across different trading partners make it more difficult to integrate into Dynamics?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Bob. You know, EDI is famously the standard that is implemented differently by everybody.
Yeah.
And so we do see, and it is a fairly nuanced set of differences between different trading partners, different retailers, and so forth. That I think the biggest thing that catches people out is it's easy to think you understand EDI and can quickly knock up something in code that will deal with it. And then when you get your second, third trading partner on, you'll find, oh, it's slightly different. Oh, I didn't take into account this piece. And then when you get your fourth and fifth, you'll discover a bunch of other things that you didn't realize that they could put into an 850 because you never saw one before, right? Um,
Hmm.
so I think it's more a case of having the right technology to address the differences. Something that had native kind of EDI capabilities built in, rather than trying to build it out of Lego bricks, because there are so many dark corners in the EDI specs that it's difficult to catch them all unless you've been doing it for a while.
I want to get back to this talking about ERP selection also in the context of B2B integration. Now, typical ERP selection process will involve, by definition, many stakeholders. You've got sales, you've got operations, you've got customer service, and who knows what else.
Mhm.
Should the same people be involved in the B2B integration platform selection process?
I I think, yeah, I think the answer is yes. Again, if you think about the B2B integration process as a purely IT problem, you're probably missing a lot of opportunity there. So there's things that you could do there, like expose some of the information that's flowing in and out to sales, so they can do things like see the orders coming in from Walmart and how they vary over time. And you can do that in the integration layer. There's things you can do for finance, like admin, like day sales outstanding, monitoring invoice aging, and those kind of things, where they may have individual systems for that, but you can also expose some of that. As I was talking about, the system of truth. Did we actually get the invoice, and did it get processed all the way through? Those kind of things, where the B2B integration can provide value outside of just purely nuts and bolts of the integration itself. So yeah, I mean, a broad understanding of what can be done and how it can benefit the business means that those same stakeholders can certainly get value from being involved in the process.
Thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate that. Let's move into audience Q&A. Let's invite the audience into this now. We do have just a few minutes to take audience questions. We have some of them already come in, but again, if you have any additional questions, please go ahead and put them into the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and Dave will address as many of them as we can, time permitting. Okay, Dave, so this question, you were talking about how your B2B integration platform must be ready to handle EDI, non-EDI, API communication. There's so much application programming interface communication. With the recent rise of APIs, supposedly, replacing EDI, I don't know. The question is, and the flexibility of APIs, do you actually see a world where we eventually move away from EDI entirely?
Yeah, that's a question as old as time, almost, or as old as
Sure.
by itself,
As
right?
old as EDI almost in a way.
We've been I forget who it was. Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Somebody's and it's the same with EDI. The reality is it's so established, particularly in the large retail and logistics spaces, that it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So I think if if it was dead in 20 years, I'd be surprised, and it's certainly not dying any sooner than that. What is happening is there are certain interactions that are more suited to more real-time operations. So, the classic kind of "where's my Amazon truck? Is it on my street yet?" type, rapid exchange of information is happening more through application program APIs. And a lot of status updates are happening more regularly now because the technology is much faster. And so those are happening through APIs. So you do see these kind of mixed mode now business processes where you might get a quote through an API, but then actually issue the order through EDI. So it's more kind of eating some of the use cases around the edges, but the core things that EDI is being used for are still going to be there for a long time to come, I think.
I did mention AI, and we really haven't talked about that up to this point, David, but maybe we should tackle it with this question coming in. Artificial intelligence, it, of course, is the hot topic of any conversation that has to do with technology today. What part do you foresee AI playing within the B2B integration space going forward?
Yeah, we like any organization, we've been doing a lot of thinking about this and experimenting and running some trials and things, and we see it applying certainly in three obvious places around the B2B integration space, and those are really building integrations, operating and detecting errors, and then forecasting and kind of analytics. So on the building side, we're already seeing these kind of co-pilot type coding assistance, and we see that coming into the B2B integration space. How can I better understand how to integrate A with B using some AI techniques, looking at integrations that have been built before and so forth. So that's the first one. On the operational side, inevitably, with any transaction that involves more than one party, something's going to go wrong at some point, or more than one system. And trying to figure out, number one, what went wrong, and then number two, how to fix it, is also something we're looking at AI for. So you can look at the patterns of errors and what we did last time and those kind of things and process those from an AI perspective. And then the third side, which we're really quite excited about, one of the things about having an integration platform that deals with all the different integrations is that you see a lot of data coming back and forwards. And the primarily thing we're doing is enabling those exchanges to happen. But there's a lot of things we could potentially learn from that data that we can then provide as a value add to our customers. So, things like, hey, there's something weird going on. Normally I get this kind of order pattern and suddenly it spiked. First of all, tell me it spiked, and then can the AI approach figure out why that happened, and do I need to do anything about it? So really analyzing the data flowing through the platform, we think has a lot of potential value to our customers going forward.
You alluded a little while ago to the issue of the so-called black box in a multi-partner ecosystem. Of course, AI raises the question of the black box itself in terms of how did it come to these particular decisions. And I'm just wondering, will we get to the point where AI is so sophisticated in the context of ERP that we can take our hands off the wheel and let the system drive itself? Or are we always going to want to know, how to make these decisions ourselves and why the machine came up with these conclusions?
Wouldn't that be great? We could all retire to the beach with our pina coladas and just let things happen. No, I mean, I think the state, obviously there's been, amazing things happen with AI over the last couple of years with ChatGPT and the whole generative AI stuff, large language models. I still think it's an assistive technology rather than a replacement technology, at least now. So to highlight things that you should look at and maybe point out the anomalies and maybe make suggestions how to make things run better. But I'm not ready to turn the keys over entirely right now. I think it's more of a, hey, we can do a lot to make you more efficient and to make operations more efficient. But ultimately, you still need people in the loop in places.
You really want the teenager driving your car.
Exactly.
I'm not sure.
Exactly.
You alluded to this next question kind of touches on what you were talking earlier about just the things you have to look out for when you're doing all this. But I just thought I would repeat the question and help drive home the point. What is something that companies both big and small miss when integrating an ERP with a provider like Cleo?
What do they miss? I think sometimes they miss that understanding of the customization or otherwise of the ERP. So don't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily immediately spring to mind as, oh, and we should make Cleo aware of these things we've done slightly differently. And sometimes they also miss and you mentioned it, Bob, the kind of subtlety of variation between trading partners. Yeah, why does Walmart's order look different from Safeway's? Aren't they just the same thing? They're an 850, right? Whereas unless you understand the subtleties of EDI, it's easy to overlook. And then the other thing that gets missed is the integration into Dynamics in particular, and choosing the right mechanism. And we had some learnings way back in the day where you got to choose where to use the APIs and where to use the integration framework and such like to make sure you're doing the right thing on the Dynamics side, so you don't mess things up there.
Mm-hmm. I like this next question because it acknowledges the fact that any tech implementation is not just about the tech. Could you please speak to change management, the change management aspect of ERP for small and medium-sized businesses versus large enterprises with global operations? What learnings, frameworks could you share with us in that area?
Well, that
do you have another hour?
Exactly. I mean, it's that people have written whole books on this stuff, so I'm not sure I can do it much justice, but it's about being really transparent with the business and really understanding what you're trying to do. And people will change if they understand the benefit of it to them. So it's got to be a two-way street. It's got to be learning from the business so that you can make their life easier, better, more efficient, and therefore they will understand why you're doing it and adopt it. But it's a, as I kind of said earlier, it's not an isolated IT project. And if you think about it that way, then it's never going to work. And change management shouldn't be something you apply afterwards, right? It's something you're thinking about, just like integration, thinking about through the whole process, saying, okay, how is the organization going to change, and how do I keep them bought into the whole process during the implementation?
Great. Well, Dave, I am the bearer of bad news here, and that is that we were just about out of time because this has been a great discussion, and I wish it could go on for much longer. But we do have time for just one final question, and here it is. ERP modernization is a very expensive project, and so is implementing new B2B integration platforms. So, after all is said and done, how should I measure ROI and ensure that my organization is getting the most out of our overall investment?
Yeah, I think go in with a broad plan to understand how you're going to make the business better. So it's not, and I've said this a few times, but it's worth saying again, it isn't just an IT operation, an IT project. It's a business project. And you'd be surprised at, when you start digging into the dark corners of what you can automate or what you can do better. Some of the ROI will just come out and show itself. So you can, and the other thing is, doing some re-engineering to get now to gain speed going forward is the other thing that you can kind of put into that thinking. So automating as much as you can, smoothing out the rough corners, will then set the business up to do things that it wouldn't otherwise be able to do in terms of sales growth and operational efficiency. So look at not just what you can smooth out now, but what it's going to enable you to do going forward. And that will show up potentially a huge return on the investment.
ERP selection, implementation, B2B platform integration, and getting the most out of your Microsoft Dynamics ERP. This has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much, Dave. It was very, very informative. And I also want to thank our audience for your great contributions as well. Take a look at this. This is a QR code that'll take you to a case study collection from Cleo that will help you to automate integrations between your D365 ERP and your ecosystem of trading partners, as we were talking about today, applications, marketplaces. Scan that to learn more, or don't worry about scanning it because it will, of course, be sent to all attendees of this webinar. Once again, Dave Brunswick, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, audience, for your participation. Thank you, Cleo. Everybody, have a fantastic day.
Thanks, Bob.